we'll be skipping some exercises just to speed things up. So if you could commit your work somewhere and switch to 1.4 branch. So in such an action, 1.4, one of the 1.4. In such an action, when you don't have the param converter annotation defined, what happens? And one could tell me what's going on in Symfony. How that happens that a post object is injected into the controller. Yeah, but I don't have an annotation, so which param converter? Yeah, but that's one of the converters that actually kicks in. So what happens internally in Symfony is that there's no configuration, there's no annotation, so it iterates through all of them, through all of the registered param converters, calls a method on them to see if that param converter supports the post until it finds one. And finds the entity param converter, says, hey, I can handle that. And it makes a query to the database, so uses entity manager to do a simple find one by ID in this case. Object is returned and injected into the action. So that's one more point where we are coupled to doctrine without even realizing that, because there's nothing that says doctrine here. So the branch we currently checked out has a param converter explicitly defined, and it's a param converter that calls a service. Okay, I'm just saying this all. We won't go do any exercises related to this. Saying this all just to show you that that's what we've done here, so that. Again, one more point where we are decoupling for doctrine. So this will fetch the defined service post repository, call a defined method, which is find one by slug, pass the slug in, and return the object injected into the controller. If the object is not found, it fires the not found exception, just like another param converter. So are we done with pushing doctrine out of our application? Can you think of one more place where we're still coupled? It's again hard to spot, because that's in the security layer. We use the database, the entity user provider. So what we'll do now is create a custom user provider that uses the repository, user repository to fetch the user. So you need to create a new user provider, implement the user provider interface with the repository. Clear? Go. If anyone has questions, raise hand. Obviously, you'll need to register this as a service and then configure the security YML to use it instead of the entity user provider. Guys, you're a big group. I can't see everything, so if you have any questions, just ask, please. So as you can see, there's a price for loose coupling. Framework did some things for us and made it really convenient and quick to do stuff. To decouple from it, we need to do a bit more work. But it pays off in the long run. I hope to show you that with the last exercise. So for now, bear with me. If you look at the admin index action, it calls the repository find all method. Where does it come from? The base entity repository class. So we still kind of rely on the doctrine here without even knowing about it much. So my next step would be to register all of those methods explicitly on our repository classes. I won't force you to do that. We'll just skip to the next branch. Just to speed up things a bit. So if you can commit your stuff and move actually to .1 entities, that's also another step skipped. Everyone is on 2.1 branch? So two things happen here. If you look at the repositories, especially the post repository, I have registered all the methods we've used here explicitly, not to rely on the entity repository. The goal being that I could actually refactor this not to extend the base repository class. Okay? I don't want to rely on anything from doctrine. So even such a stupid method like find all, I registered it explicitly by just calling the parent method. I just want to have all of these defined. So now if you want to have a look at how you query your model, you just go to any of these repositories and see, okay, this is how I query it. There's no way somewhere in the controllers there's another way of querying it. Repositories are the place to go to find out how you query the model. One more thing happened here. I actually extracted the model into the block namespace. So you can see the comment, you can see the post, and you can see the user. This still relies on Symfony a bit, but that's not what we're focusing on. So I would probably get rid of these assertions in the model, just register them somewhere else in the XML or YML, so that the model is clean. But if you look closely, there's no. It used to be that we had ORM annotations here, so you can quite easily convert between different configuration formats in Doctrine. And I use the command at the top to convert mapping to the XML. So the mappings are now in the infrastructure folder. As an XML. It's nothing Symfony specific. It's nothing domain specific. It's simply an implementation detail. That's why it lives in a separate directory. I could actually take these mappings to another project, non-Symfony based, and could use it there. That's why I'm extracting it from the bundle. I could use the model outside of the Symfony context. One more thing to notice here, the user is actually an interface, because that's all I need to know in the model. I just need some kind of a user that has a get email method. That's all that's used in the model layer. And the user in here, this is a Symfony user. This is how Symfony sees user. This is a framework-specific thing. That's why it wasn't moved to the model. It also implements our blog user, so we could pass it the model whenever we need it. But this is how Symfony sees the user. We don't need it in the model. This implements the Symfony stuff. So now if I could draw the dependencies, the dependencies would go from block controller to the model. Model knows nothing about Symfony. And also, mapping already is extracted as a separate layer. However, the repositories are still in the bundle. So what we'll do now is we'll introduce interfaces for repositories that describe how we query the model. And we put them in the models, in the block namespace. Okay, so for each repository, register an interface in the block namespace. For each, only for comment and the post. User is something Symfony specific that should go into the bundle. And I'm going to put the user repository with the user class in the entity folder now. And then I'll make the implementations actually implement specific interfaces. So now, these repositories are created with factories. So the class defined here is actually not used for anything but the type hint. So what we can do now here is to actually make it return an interface. So that when you fetch it from the container, you only see the methods that are defined on the interface. I need to refresh the cache. No. What happens now if I go to the blog controller, try to use this. I haven't refreshed the cache yet, so you can see all the methods that are defined on the base entity repository class. I refresh the page now to refresh the cache. I'm actually going to remove it. Refresh it again. So now the container was regenerated. It's still indexing. And I can only see the methods defined on the interface. This is when you access the container directly, which is most of the time only controllers. When you inject something into your services, you will use the type hint, and the type hint is going to be the interface, not the implementation. Make sense? So what do you think the next step could be? Our repositories are still in the bundle. While that's not a Symfony-specific thing, bundle is Symfony-specific. Repositories are just one of the implementations we could have. The interfaces are in the model, so the implementations should go to infrastructure. Okay. So we should just put it here. That will require me to change the namespaces and also the mapping. In here. Hopefully tests will pass. No. Yeah, there's a few more places that needs to be changed. Namely, all the places where we used the repository type hint, we should change that to the interface type hint. So I can think of a few places like the commands. See user repository, that's wrong. If I import it again, I need the interface, not the infrastructure stuff. So you will never reference the infrastructure stuff directly. That's only something that container can know about, that wires the things together. The user provider. Actually, in this branch, user provider is tested. There's a unit test for it. Yep, that works. Not sure why this happens. Okay. Think about what we've done for a while. If I want to modify any doctrine stuff, where should I go now? Yeah, is there any doctrine outside of infrastructure? Is it anywhere else? Container configuration perhaps, but not, well, you access the entity manager there, right? But that's configuration, that's how you wire things together. So if I drew a diagram of this now, do I have it on one of the slides? Not really. It's not really visible in the end, in the back. But from the top, block controller relies on our model now, okay? No doctrine there. We have a doctrine adapter in the infrastructure layer that implements our model for doctrine. And that's the only thing depending on doctrine. So what happens now if we want to replace doctrine, or if there's something wrong with doctrine, there's one place to go, infrastructure. You don't have to go to all the bundles you have, you don't need to look for your controllers, you don't need to look for your services to find doctrine. Okay, where have I used doctrine? If you want to replace that single controller, replace doctrine with Elasticsearch there, you don't go there. You don't go to the controller. Because controller relies on the interface that's in your model. There's nothing in your controllers or services that depends on doctrine directly. Which has a nice benefit of you're able to actually replace doctrine by replacing the single directly in your infrastructure layer and the way you wire that together. Okay? So going back. Any questions so far? Please. Please switch to 3.3 branch. So what I want to do now is to prepare ourselves for just to make the implementation a bit configurable. So I want you to rename these services to something else and create aliases of these names to point to these services. So they could act as pointers to alternative implementations. So let's say let's rename them to postrepository.doctrine. Right? And then obviously our controllers refer to them as without the suffix. So let's alias them. why are we doing this? What I want you to do now is to provide a PDO implementation of a, let's say, which one is the simplest, has the least methods in it? Comment? Yeah, let's provide a PDO implementation of a comment repository. So then, you can, once you're done with that, you can register the PDO's implementation here. Sorry, that's the same. Initialize it some way. I don't know how, that's up to you. And then you can switch commands to PDO. Okay? Yeah, you'll probably use a constructor to initialize it, so you can no longer type it to an interface here. So I would put it in here, probably. You could also put it into an additional repository directory if you'd like. If you want to get the solution, just check out the 4.3 branch. So the way I organized it, I registered a PDO service, that's a PDO connection, and then repositories that use the connection. And in here, it's configured to use PDO. So if you look at the application, it should still work. Surprisingly, what do you think? What's faster, Doctrine or PDO? Is it? So this is PDO, load time 44 milliseconds. See that? Let's see how Doctrine is doing. I'll just clear the cache to make sure. Vagrant not always refreshes that. First one is going to be slow because it generates a cache. The next one, 54, 68. Well, a bit slower, but you might think it's a lot slower. Actually, Vagrant limitations are not showing that difference, I think, correctly. The file system here is the problem. So what we did here is we provided an alternative implementation. Because it is decoupled, because we only rely on our model, it's so easy. You don't go, notice we didn't go to the application at all. Application was not touched. I changed it to PDO with no effort. Okay? So that's an alternative implementation, but it works. There's another advantage of using this approach. You can provide enhancements. So we switch to PDO. What if I want to cache the latest blog posts and the single blog post view? Only those. What could I do now? It's not me. Any ideas? Because I'm going to ask you to do it. Okay, switch to the branch 5.1. That's what it does. It enables Doctrine cache bundle and configures it, so there's a caching driver configured. And what I want you to do is to cache those two queries. So give me some ideas how we could do that. Please. You. So we have provided an alternative implementation, which is a PDO. So our application works with PDO now, right? Now, I want you to cache the latest blog posts and a single blog post query. How could we do that in the current setup? When we have a doctrine here, PDO here. Decorator. Yeah, so you could decorate. Mm-hmm.
And just cache everything there.
Yeah.
And apply the new repository, the cached cached post repository to the alias.
Yes. That's exactly what I want you to do. So in the services, just to explain the idea that you just described, we have we want to cache some post queries, so post repository cache. Post repository. And the cache service is called, I don't remember. Repository cache. So I want you to cache two things. Find latest and find one by slug. Everything else should work without cache. So you should probably just proxy the call to the original repository. You shouldn't rely on the implementation, so what's injected as the first argument here is not a PDO repository. That's a block repository interface. So this could actually work with both Doctrine and PDO, or whatever implementation you give. This is the last exercise, so don't cheat. This is wrong, by the way. I was checking this. Oh. This is what I had in mind for a constructor. So the second argument is cache interface from doctrine cache. That's not doctrine ORM, that's an independent library. It can be used outside of doctrine ORM. One of the methods is missing on the interface. So those who tried to do the exercise themselves found that out. The post repository misses find all method. Okay, last thing to do. So, what if we save a blog post from the admin panel? If you do that, if you go to the admin panel, save the blog post, the old one is still visible in the front end because we cached it. Okay, invalidate the cache when the blog post has changed. That's really the last exercise. So they fail. No, they don't. Because I think yes. I didn't write the original app and didn't write those tests. Sorry. Yeah, they don't cover everything. They don't cover comments, for example. So. Yes, it should be included in the cache key. It's not in my solution. No, in my solution I didn't include the limit. I missed that. Yeah, but in real life you probably should use a pattern or something. Not by default. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I talk a bit about in practice when do you usually, I mean, in real life, do you usually recommend and it's worth it to do such things because we see it needs a lot of effort to decouple.
It needs, yeah.
This way we can decouple from, I don't know, controllers, we can decouple from the templating engine, we can, from actually any external or internal dependency, we can do so, but with the cost of time and additional layer and stuff like that. There's even
so this.
I don't know if you've noticed, there is a full no framework bundle.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is
Yeah.
But then you're coupled to this bundle, so I don't see much sense.
Yeah,
So
that's...
what is the recommendation, and when it makes sense? If you are sure that you will be stuck with doctrine till the end of the project's life, then probably makes no sense, right?
Yeah, we're doing refactoring here. That's always more time consuming than starting from scratch. This approach is very easy and very quick if you start from the beginning. And if you assume that framework, then doctrine, all that stuff is an infrastructure, and you start implementing, like start with your tests. If you use acceptance tests, your acceptance tests don't use the framework at all. If you start like that, that's very easy, very quick to do. But this approach, like, this is what we're aiming on here is basically the clean architecture or hexagonal architecture. And that approach works very well on projects that are long engagements, that are not just implement and forget, that you just code something quickly and just forget about it. No one else is going to ever maintain it. Or writing a prototype. This approach is not for that. This is for long living projects that need to be maintained and change, need to accept the change. What this lets you to do is to actually defer commitment. Notice the beginning of the project is the point in time where you know the least about it. While you try to make decisions at that point. You try to say, okay, I'm going to use MySQL, I'm going to use MongoDB. You start making those decisions and commit to them by using frameworks. While that might not be the best, it is never the best time to make those decisions. In a few months into the project, like, okay, MongoDB wasn't that a great idea, now I need to rewrite half of the application.
Yeah, but if you're building Symfony application, it is most likely that you will be stuck with 3 template engine till the end of the project.
So you make yeah, but I wouldn't decouple from Twig.
Of course, that's what I'm talking about.
There's no point.
So this applies on decoupling from something that you might change in the future.
Yes.
Only then it makes sense. Though, yeah, it's faster to start if you from scratch writing an additional layer, but you still have one additional layer, so it makes no sense.
So the way the demo was written, it's very quick to start. You can write that in a day, I guess, right? This might seem like slower to start, but in long term, you can maintain a stable pace. While with coupling to the framework, to doctrine stuff, you might start quickly. I'm really not doing anything. You might start quickly, but then after a while, you just slow down. Because everything is so tightly coupled, you don't know where to go, everything is connected. Here, you start at some point, and you maintain that pace, more or less, equally. So that's why I say that's for long-term projects. And again, it's easier to start like this than later refactor to this approach. And it's all about deferring the commitment to your decisions made in the beginning. Because if you started the project like this from the beginning, you can just talk to something else. You can move it to NoSQL database, whatever. It also, you also need to make a call whether you really have to decouple. If you look at my cache layer implementation, I didn't try to decouple from the cache interface from doctrine cache. In this case, I didn't feel it's needed. On some projects, I would introduce my own interface. That depends. But this interface, I consider it quite stable. It all depends on stability of the project. So I can safely rely on it. I can always provide my own implementations if something has changed over time. Does it make sense? So we ended up with this. Right? Nothing in our application depends on doctrine. There's no arrows leading from doctrine to the app. That makes those adapters replaceable. And all it is, dependence inversion in practice. That's all it is. So I really don't find this approach slower. If you start from the beginning, if you practice this a bit, I can be very efficient working this way. What's slow, I think, is learning how to do it. So it will take time until you start making the right decisions, know where to actually introduce those interfaces, where it's not worth it. It just takes time to learn that. But as soon as you learn it, the working this way is very, very quick. And most importantly, you can maintain the sustainable pace of work. You don't slow down, you just continue working in the same predictable way. Any questions? Was it helpful? Any questions, feedback, comments? Oh, please.
It's possible also to use the doctrine object manager, which is already an abstraction for...
Yes. So there's doctrine itself as an abstraction for persisting stuff. But it's not perfect. Some of the implementations like ORM or ODM, some of them have different kind of methods, and I don't find it safe to rely on that.
For example, the transaction.
Yeah.
Or,
Transaction might be different, yes. I actually tried to, instead of PDO, I tried to implement Propel for this workshop, but it was just too much effort. There was too much code to write, because Propel provides, it's an active record. So it actually, you couldn't use, in Doctrine what's nice, that you can actually use the same classes for your model, and they can be treated as entities. In Propel, that's not possible. You need to have your Propel model that separates from your own model and translate between two. That's just more effort to do that with Propel, and documentation doesn't help. Last time I used Propel was Symfony 1.2. Any more comments, questions?
Based on your experience, apart from the doctrine, what would you suggest to
Decouple from?
decouple from?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, what I would suggest to decouple from. I usually work on projects that are long-term. So the way I work, I start working on the application that's totally independent, that's pure PHP stuff. So kind of everything is decoupled. And then I plug in the Symfony framework, doctrine, whatever I need. But I've been working like this for a long time. I wouldn't recommend doing that if you're just starting, because you need to learn that, and that simply is going to take you a long time in the beginning. So things like doctrine is definitely, most of the time, it's worth to decouple from it. If you have any API clients, that's good to do as well. Yeah, anything that might change. Yes, but yeah, like Twig. I don't think you might want to change Twig, especially that you can mix Twig with other templating engines. Especially that you can mix Twig with Symfony, at least with other templating engines. It's very easy. So I don't even try to decouple from Twig. The code that you write to use Twig is anyway quite simple, and it can be rewritten quite easily. Even you can automate that just to call another templating engine. You can write a set expression that's going to go through your code base and do that. Yeah.
As for testing, do you use that structure also for database structures, for tests, if you have them?
So with this approach, I don't go through the database. So my repositories in tests are in memory. So the simple arrays, you put something into repository, fetch it, that's all array-based. Sorry. And then I only have, so most of the, yep, we're about to finish. Most of the tests are unit tests. That's what you should have, most of your tests should be unit tests. And they all go through, they're all in memory. Same acceptance tests. I have my in-memory representation for implementation for repositories. And they all go through in-memory repositories or other kinds of objects, whatever I have in the application. And then you only have few functional tests or end-to-end tests. You just look at if that all works together. You don't have to test all the possible paths through a real database. So you actually don't need that many fixtures to do that because there's a little amount of tests that actually go end-to-end. That doesn't make sense. Doesn't answer your question.
Yeah, kind of. Last we had a project where the database was, you had a lot of tests. You could not unit components for...
Oh, sorry, I didn't mention one thing. You also have some integration tests. I didn't have tests here. It would take too much time to write tests on the workshop. But those repository implementations, so doctrine repository, would be integration tested. But that doesn't mean that it would go end-to-end through the whole application, but that would be only testing the doctrine stuff. So does it actually call doctrine properly? Does it return something from the database? Simple tests like that. That just, you call the repository directly and see that it returns objects from the database. Those are simple tests and very, very quick because you don't go through all the application, just call the repository. So I would write the same kind of test for PDO or cache, just to see if that talks to the libraries properly. Makes sense?
We talked about forms.
Mm-hmm.
Think about Symfony forms, and it seems that sometimes it's suggested to use something like a DTO object.
Yes.
To pick up a
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so forms, Symfony forms are framework specific, so it's fine to have them in controllers or framework layer. But then sometimes, so our model here evolves from doctrine, which by default you have getters, setters, all that stuff. If you follow DDD or focus on the domain, you won't have that. You won't have that. So while the Symfony forms rely on that. It is possible to work around it, but sometimes it's simple to introduce DTOs as plain objects that just data containers. You put the forms put data in there, and then you convert that to your entity. In some cases, it's easier to do than trying to put whatever you have into the model. So I wouldn't say it's a good practice or bad practice. It's just a practice you can use to decouple from the forms. Yeah, definitely. Any more questions? Okay. I'm still here, so grab me if you want to chat or drink beer. Yeah, my last slide. As you can see, I love beer. You can find me on Twitter and GitHub, or just chat to me here. So thank you. Please give me feedback on the feedback form, whatever it is. Yeah, thank you.